think we'll make some motions to get started here. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the second Environmental Experts webinar by Channel Islands Restoration. Last month, we had Matt Gilliams with the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. And today, we're joined by Lisa Stratton, who's the Director of Ecosystem Management for UCSB's Cheadle Center, which stands for Cheadle Center for Biodiversity and Ecological Restoration. The organization's had a couple of names over its long history. It's been doing a lot out of UCSB. And really, when Wayne Farron was involved with that center, that is the first group that I got involved with that were doing volunteer trips on Santa Cruz Island. So all employees of what's now the Cheadle Center were going out there regularly and doing work. And I tagged along, and the rest is history. So as the manager of the open space lagoon at UCSB and other open spaces on campus, Lisa's active in pursuing opportunities to restore native habitat, improve water quality, and support biodiversity, including threatened and endangered species. She received her PhD at the University of Hawaii and her master's from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and her undergraduate degree at Stanford. She has been a change agent on the landscape committee since the inception of UCSB's sustainability commitment and work towards promoting sustainable, non-invasive, low-water landscapes that celebrate UCSB's unique location with a matrix of natural habitats and wetlands. In addition, Lisa supports restoration through grants, promotes research, and works in collaboration with a diversity of local, state, and federal partners. Not to mention a lot of private folks who've come out and volunteered extensively for your efforts, Lisa, which have been really fabulous. And we're going to hear about them right now. So I'll turn it over to Lisa Stratton. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. These webinars are so strange. I'd love to see your faces, and I feed off seeing people. So let's hope we can keep it going. Okay, so this next slide is the Channel Islands slide about their organization, and I'm proud to be presenting in this forum. I know that you all, as a group and as individuals, make a difference in Santa Barbara and the region to conserving it, and it takes all kinds of efforts to help us protect these resources. So thanks a lot for having me here. I'm excited to share with you the latest news from North Campus Open Space, calling this project Going Beyond Plant Restoration, this presentation. And I'm actually not going to focus on a lot of the basic restoration details, figuring you all know how to plant a plant and weed a weed. And I'm going to focus on some of the special things we've been working on this project site, after I give a brief background for people that might want to be reminded of that. So the project is shown here in this aerial photo soon after it was created, with the series of vernal pools, the estuarine wetland restored, and is about 100 acres here. And then there's another 36 acres adjacent to it that we're also working on, but we didn't disturb with the heavy equipment. And just to build on what Ken introduced me at, we call ourselves CCBER, CCBER, and we manage now about 340 acres, these blue areas on UCSB campus. We do not manage Coal Oil Point Reserve. So there's a lot of open space. Campus is basically an island surrounded by wetlands, and as the state grows and the campus is in turn asked to grow, it bumps against these wetlands, and we are lucky enough to get to restore those either as mitigation or just with grant money and opportunities we see to improve the landscape and integrate it with the campus mission of education, research, and outreach. So That's just a little context here. Our project is over here, as many of you know. And just briefly, I just want to say that one of the ways that any of these projects become possible is from the beginning work to just stop development in areas. So back in the 90s, there was this Elwood Devereaux planning effort in which proposed housing from here was moved to here. Campus had bought all the land around the golf course and agreed through this process not to develop this or this and to move development back from the coast. And this was a gift that was given to us by planners, by Trust for Public Land, by the Land Trust, all these groups, the university, now the city of Goleta, that worked together to conserve this open space. And that set the stage for our project to be even possible or meaningful ecologically. And as any of you know who've been involved with restoration on the coast of California, these things that we call the T sheets, these 1871 topo sheets, are crucial for understanding what we have destroyed in the last 100 or so years and providing sort of a roadmap to what we might return. So this is a slough in 1870, which extended up with these upper arms. And as you know, it was reduced down to this at some point. So this is a 1928 bill. I just want to show you these wetland extents that still existed then. 1950s topo map showing these wetlands still extant, just the beginning of oil and gas development and other development. But by 1967, just years shy of the Coastal Act, the Clean Water Act, and all these really important legislations that give us a forum for stopping this kind of thing, we have our smoking gun aerials. So these white areas are all graded and dirt was filled into the upper arms of the wetland. Here you can see that upper arm just completely, there's a nice housing development here. And this golf course was created. So what happens when you create a golf course? You get a monoculture of some invasive grass, some non-native trees. Trees are nice, but, and then you get the land that scraped, this adjacent land we call South Parcel, scraped with just dominated by monoculture of mustards, fennel, pampas grass, and I'm sure all of you are very familiar with those plants. What else do you get? You get flooding, another local issue. These birds had copped to the purpose of this area. And flooding was a regular occurrence in the site. It would close the golf course for weeks at times. And in fact, the golf course also had this aspect that it was private property. It wasn't a public open space, and very unusual, county flood control would go in there and basically chew out all the vegetation in these narrow channels that were left in the filled wetland to try to get some flood passage, because this filling created a flood zone hazard for the residents nearby. So for all those reasons, lack of diversity, historic presence, impacts to current people, this project started to make increasing sense. And so when you project that 1871 image of the wetland on the landscape, you could see there was still quite a lot that wasn't developed. And with CCBER getting to manage this chunk of land as us develop these outer edges, it became obvious that really the only thing to do was to see if we could possibly integrate the restoration of this with the restoration of the wetland. And that started the Odyssey. And if you want to know more about that part of it, watch the video on our website called From Golf Course to Wetlands that Love made, really great. And it'll give you a lot of that story of how we came to buy the golf course with the Trust for Public Land and through the plan process for the project. I'm going to jump right into getting going and some of the goals and values that we were seeking in the project. And now I'm going to spot down on just a few current things that we're doing and some things that I think are exciting. This is just a sort of a conceptual plan for area, some decisions that were made as part of planning and collaboration with many local ecologists, faculty and staff from campus, our own staff from all the permitting agencies, Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps, etc. And some of the things we wanted to do was convert it, allow tide waters to come in and create a tidal prism that would expand and connect it to Devereaux Slough that had been blocked for all those years. Create mudflats, but not as extensively as in Devereaux Slough, to allow for sea level rise and climate change. So a lot more salt marsh, this greenish bar. And then to excavate the soil from this wetland to create this, we would place it here where it was largely taken from and restore one of the more challenging habitats to restore in this region, which is perennial grassland, Nacella pulchra. It just likes to turn weedy fast without a lot of maintenance and care. And to include one of our rarest habitat types, which is vernal pools in the project. Okay. These are just some of the goals, and I'm not going to go through this wordy slide, but I'm going to touch on all these different topics through the course of this in a sort of a quick way, focusing more on some than others. Here's a image of the project right as we're about to grade it. So this is the contractor getting ready in April of 2017. The trees had been removed and we'd saved all the material of the trees to reuse. Within 4 months, he had used these tractors, these low pressure tractors, which work well in wetlands, to gracefully flow over and scoop up dirt here and drop it over here and recreate the historic landforms that were there. And literally by August, they had essentially graded the whole site. We were at that time mixing in amendments to the site, working on erosion control measures and other such things to get the site ready for the next stage. And by that winter, we were fully ready to receive the gift of rain and let the wetland shine in its glory. And it did reduce flood levels by about 2 feet in the communities that traditionally flooded around here. So that first goal has been met. Here's one of the things we wanted to highlight about freshwater in the system, and this little discovery trail, which is near our entryway, includes a bioswale that drains just the parking lot. And it's just amazing in that big rain event we had, how much water came through this system and all the habitat and life it brings. So often the water from developed lands is put in pipes, inaccessible to wildlife and plants, and pumped right, drained right into the ocean or other bodies of water that can't necessarily take it. So by daylighting these drainage and creating habitat, we bring people closer to our natural processes. One of our other goals that CCBER's had and many other groups around here support is really focusing on our local genotypes and protecting and restoring those. We don't go down to the store and buy a bunch of seeds and throw them on the landscape. We actually collected the seeds for all the plants that we planted out here. And that was really important. And we started collecting seeds in about 2015 so that we'd have enough to do it. The species that we might bring in that aren't local are ones that have been extirpated from here, but which belong here. And you'll see some stories of some of those habitats. The other thing I want to point out here is sort of the trail system that we developed. One of the aspects of this trail system you'll notice is that trails don't go everywhere. In fact, it doesn't circle around the whole wetland, and you're going to find out why we designed it that way. This is a raised trail, and then we have the marsh trail. Here's just a few before and after shots. This is pre-grading in the golf course, just the grass was removed, post-grading, and then after planting and another salt marsh area. The salt marsh plants are really establishing well and reproducing and spreading and forming a really functional habitat. Who made this possible? Besides the staff on campus, which I'm going to talk about, students have been a huge part of our team. They've helped planting, weeding, doing research, outreach, working with volunteers, just been an amazing collaboration with all the students. And they've, I think, all of them have told us that they really get a lot out of the project. And then the majority of my staff has been with us for the whole project, and each of them brings some special talent or skill to the project. We have people that are really focused on ciphering out what specific species are, which ones do we want to bring back, which ones do we really need to remove. We have people who are great at coordinating people who do education really well. So it's just been an amazing team of hardworking people that made this project possible. So what other roles have the students played besides planting? They've also been helping with research. So here you see a variety of different projects they've been involved in, looking at carbon sequestration, taking cores through this soil that we realign to establish baseline carbon contents, assessing salinity, working with plants to see that the conditions are suitable for them before we even did the project, monitoring water quality parameters. We have graduate students working on vernal pool management, documenting carbon sequestration, wildlife use, just all kinds of things going on in this living laboratory. And that's been super exciting for me. Okay, we do take a lot of data, and unlike most of my talks, I'm actually have very few graphs in this talk. So this is one of them, though. I just wanted to share 2018 and 2019. This is distribution of work hours by person implementing. So staff is a little more than half. Students, you can see, is more than a quarter, almost a third, and volunteers is another big group of people. So many of you guys listening are probably volunteer with Channel Islands Restoration, and you do make a huge difference. 20 graph, which I don't have here, is gonna look different, unfortunately, but hopefully we can get back to communing in nature together soon. And what are we all working on? Irrigation, maintenance, etc. But planting, weeding continue to be the major activities for this project, because we are planting everything ourselves. Now I'm going to sort of focus on the grassland, which I mentioned is one of the more challenging communities to restore. We actually collected a set of seeds and worked with S&S Seeds to grow a field for us, because they have all the professional tools for harvesting our local genotype and de-awning it. And then we borrowed their drill seeder, very kind, and we drill seeded. So they took our original 7 pounds and produced 78 pounds of seed that we then distributed. So in addition to our 300,000 hand-planted plants, now 325, we have the equivalent of another 600,000 grassland plants planted for about 1 million plants installed in the ground. Here's this Nacella polka grassland. And what you notice that's unique about these is that there's space between the grasses. It isn't that dense thatch that you find in annual grasslands. This provides space that animals need for foraging on the ground, and a place for us to establish biodiversity and wildflowers and other things. So we're working hard to maintain that. And one of the ways we're doing it now is in this particular section of the grassland, the soils were different, and there was a seed bank of annual grasses in this little sort of edge along Veneco Road. And so we're actually using fire here, these flame weeding technique, and we weed the young buds of the annual grass, but the perennial bunches can persist with the burning. And eventually we're working with a county fire, and we're going to be doing some prescribed burns set by Native Americans on the bigger grassland to maintain those ecological functions that open it up and stimulate the seeds of the wildflowers that we're working on getting established. So this is painstaking and slow, but we feel it's really important for the integrity of this system to not just have those natives in there, but to have them thrive. So what about adding that extra biodiversity? We partnered with the Garden Club of Santa Barbara, who gave us some initial funds and also our other grant funding together to work on a study of about 20 different wildflower species. Do we need to cage them to keep animals from eating? Will they grow from seed? Do we need to plant individuals? And we worked with a variety of these things last year. And this year we're implementing a much larger scale project to plant these. But here you can see lupins and owls, clover and spawns, lotuses, and different species that we were experimenting with here. And this year, from this work, we decided that these 3 species, Sidalcia, Cicericium, ranunculus, the buttercups, blue-eyed grass, the mallow, that these plants were hardy enough and seed was limited enough that we would actually grow them and plant them. So we have about 5, maybe half-acre plots out on the grassland where we're creating islands of wildflowers planted, and then in between them we're adding a lot of seeds. And we have students working with our staff on monitoring these projects to see what is the best technique for really getting this biodiversity back on site. These Canada geese are fun, they're magical, but they eat things. They eat vegetation. They eat a lot of the vegetation in this wetland, and they eat the wildflowers. So one of the restoration challenges you're often faced is, what do you do when maybe your project is too successful and you have competition for resources? At this point, we are just trying to flood the landscape with the seeds to the extent possible and plants, and hope that some escape the beaks of these happy Canada geese. So Canada geese brings us into birds and wildlife. And so I want to focus here. All these pictures were taken not from the web, but on our project site. Phalaropes and green herons and rails and hawks. These birds are eating fish. He's got a little fish. He's hunting insects and invertebrates, benthic invertebrates, aquatic vegetation, insects and seeds, voles, mice, snakes. So we've got a food web here. And that's one thing we really have been interested in trying to document, understand, and see. One of the things we did to try to jumpstart the food web was we used all those logs I mentioned that we took from the trees that we removed from the golf course, and we established them on site. Here you see snags. This is a snag, these vertical perches that we put up in certain areas. We didn't put them down by the edges of the wetland as much because we wanted to have the snowy plovers feel safe, and we didn't put them here because we thought the burrowing owl would use this slope. We also put out a bunch of logs all over for smaller, lower perches for birds and insects and lizards doing their pumping thing. And then we built these things that we call hibernaculums. They are essentially pieces of concrete from the original golf course trail. We tried to recycle as much as we could. And we basically creating these thermoregulated artificial refuges with small openings that would only allow smaller animals like mice and snakes and squirrels and not skunks and raccoons and bigger things to use as much, to create the base of the food web on one scale up. So this crew of Conservation Corps people loved making these things, and we made 80 of these because we knew we were scraping bare 100 acres of land, and we wanted to provide some refuges for animals to recolonize the site. And so far we have a lot of different mice and rodents. Here's a shrew using the site, and you can see this is one of the perches. He's got a little vole, this kestrel. We're seeing snakes on site. So the food web is starting to happen. We're studying that in a couple of ways. One is that we got approval through all the campus safety and protocol to set up a small mammal trapping regime in the salt marsh and up in the grassland, and to look at those rodents. And we are seeing quite a few. We've just got started on this in 2019 and 2020, but we are catching deer mice, harvest mice, house mice, and voles, shrews, and wood rats really have different behaviors and won't be caught in these traps, but we will be documenting them as we see them. Here's a little shrew that was just seen zipping around by someone. We also have a student working with us to replicate a baseline study. We did a lot of baseline assessments of the site, and one of them was this coverboard study to look at coverboards create kind of a thermal regulated, again, shaded sort of protected place that lizards and herps like, and so do small rodents. And Alistair is recreating our initial study, which showed a lot of fence lizards, some skinks and salamanders, and we're going to see what he finds in the coming months of his studies. So far, he's definitely got some rodents and lizards and a few snakes. So we're excited that the project is already supporting these different species. Those species eat invertebrates. And so before the project started, we did a really extensive study of the area where we were going to put all the fill and the golf course, using pitfall traps and pan traps and malaise traps to catch different kinds of insects and to understand what were sort of the baseline biodiversity conditions there. And we had, under my director, who's an amazing entomologist, Katja Seltman, we had students working in the hallways to identify all these organisms and document them. And from that work, we decided to focus on a few key organisms, pollinators and ants, to follow up on how we're affecting the biodiversity of the site. So this is a few shots of the existing site with different pan traps out to collect different pollinators. Here's a few that they've got, different bees, butterflies of different kinds. And some of these are pretty rare and endangered, as you'll see. So it's kind of amazing that by bringing the floral resources and the biodiversity back, you can bring different organisms that have symbiotic relationships with these species. And it's just a huge, wonderful living laboratory to really understand what we can do to keep this biodiversity in our world. Another small organism is the aquatic invertebrates, which are at the base of the food web for so much of this wetland system. And I really have to shout out to the Audubon Society and Steve Senesek, who has led a 3-year effort with an army of amazing students who've been documenting through water sampling and benthic invertebrates in our sort of reference site, Coal Oil Point, and at our restoration site, and counting thousands and thousands of ostracods and all kinds of aquatic invertebrates, backsliders, etc. And their work demonstrated, again, like I said, I'm shying away from graph, but they basically found higher numbers and higher diversity in our system than in Coal Oil Point after just 1 year of restoration. And one thing that might cause that is that we've got the freshwater tributaries here. So we've got a little bit more diverse conditions. Nevertheless, we had a newly graded site. So it's pretty exciting to see how fast these small organisms can recolonize a site. And that work has been great, and we're going to build on that and move into environmental DNA measures to look at other tools that we could use to the food web in various ways. Here's another measure. This is our bird survey data. So every month since the project started, we've been surveying the site, and a team has been surveying down at Coal Oil Point. And we have this software that allows us to map where we physically see the bird. So instead of just having a list and numbers for the whole site, we can actually use GIS to say, what are hot spots for, say, the marsh dwellers, the waders? What are the hot spots for the granivores, etc.? So this is a map of a year or so of data, and provides a great resource for analyzing for students and looking. And one graph I am going to show you is the comparison using these different guilds between Coal Oil Point Reserve, sort of our reference site, and North Campus Open Space. So let's say you take insectivores. They have 43 species there. We've got 40 documented in the 1819 year. They had 13 seed eaters, and we have 13 seed eaters. So the diversity and the patterns you can see are really similar. They have a few more shorebirds because they have a large beach that we don't have. But it's been super amazing to watch this gradual transformation and evolution of the species as the plants develop on site. Okay, this should have been our icon, because the burrowing owl was in our minds from the beginning. It helped preserve South Parcel way back in the 90s when campus was considering developing it. And he's come back to resecure. Well, I should say she, because actually it's the female burrowing owls that come down here in the winter to find food and more comfort until they usually go back north. Now, historically, like 40 years ago, they used to breed in Santa Barbara County much more frequently. And we're hoping that we can bring them back. So they came and started using our hibernaculum features. And then we decided, well, if we are going to possibly lure them back for nesting, we need to create some suitable nesting habitat, because the hibernaculums are really just temporary refuges. So one of the staff members, Wayne, researched and worked with some really excellent burrowing owl biologists, and we built these special nest box features under thermally insulated mounds that can provide long-term burrows. And we're hoping that the females will lure their males down here. The males protect the burrows. They're so rare up north that they don't even want to leave them. But we're hoping they'll pass the message that these habitats are suitable and we'd like to use one of them. And you're going to see one of the ways we're going to continue to help make that possible. Another really special bird that's come back is the Belding Savannah sparrow, state endangered ground nesting salt marsh, high marsh bird that was essentially extirpated from this area and has been slowly coming back to Devereaux Slough. Last year we had 3 documented nestings and probably more. They're very stealthy birds. But on our survey just Wednesday, we had a one singing, meaning he's ready to establish his territory. They like this high marsh habitat that we created as part of our sea level rise adaptation strategy. So we have all this high marsh where Devereaux Slough is much more mud flats. We planted more salt marsh so that as sea level rises, there'd be more marsh habitat to persist. One of the plants that we may be able to bring back is this salt marsh bird's beak. This endangered plant is down to just 7 or 8 populations now, stretching Morro Bay, Carp, Point Magoo, Sweetwater to Tijuana Estuary. And we believe that we may have suitable habitat here on our site. So we're excited to bring back this endangered plant for everyone to enjoy. So that is 2 of the special functions that this high marsh area can serve. The last really endangered animal I want to talk about is, not the last, is the snowy plover. And this is a map of nesting of snowy plovers between 2009 and 2014 on Coal Oil Point's wetlands. So you know they nest at the beach. And from this, we figured with sea level rise and increasing waves taking out nests almost every year there, that it would be good to create a refuge back here for them. So we mimicked the shape and size of this on this side of the Veneco Road. And that is this habitat here. And we keep it kind of clear so they can see their predators, ideally. And we had nests and a baby. But one of the ways we had that was by trying to protect them from predators. So almost, you know, if you build it, will they come? They will come, but so will their predators. And that's a challenge. Here's a couple more shots of our own North Campus open space baby. Mark Bright is an amazing photographer, and he caught this little guy right after he came out with, still got his little tip for breaking out of the egg and the baby coming there. But Chris Sandoval got this photographer from the Smithsonian on Coal Oil Point Bridge, Coal Oil Point Beach. Crow has got 2 plovers in its mouth. Crows have now been identified as one of the threats, besides off-leash dogs, besides skunks and other predators. So it's a challenge when you take on the goal of trying to preserve something special and unique, our heritage. And if we don't do it, who will? Now this dog picture, you know, it's fun. We have a dog that my daughter takes care of, but it's fun to have your dog. It's fun to see these birds fly off. But if we continue to disturb these migratory birds and when they just want to rest. They've just flown who's how many miles through the night, and they have no place that they can safely rest. We're going to keep losing them to exhaustion, to lack of habitat. There's just increasingly small niches, and we all need to stand together to help deliver a message that let's create a few islands, a few places to sustain these magical populations. And that's something I've become a lot more engaged with this project than I ever was before. And in fact, we are hoping to open this trail on the mesa of our project site this summer. And one of the things we're going to do is actually install a fence. This is a wildlife friendly fence that allows small animals and bobcats and things to get underneath it, but which sort of delivers the message. This is on our project site now over by the Marsh Trail, delivers the message and help rein in the impact of dogs. And we're hoping people will already keep dogs on leash, but we want to further reduce people cutting corners. People just love to go, hey, I just want to go here, and things like that. And we're trying to create a few islands. The burrowing owl nests are actually over here, those two burrows. This picture got moved. These purple plots are those wildflower plots I mentioned, which will be islands of wildflowers that will continue to work on spring. But this will help preserve these open space, the Belding Savanna sparrow area, the plover area, and the burrowing owl area, which is here also, from our impacts while still allowing us to see them, to experience it. So one of the goals is not just, this 10-acre site isn't going to change the world for burrowing owls, but it will provide an opportunity for us as people to be connected to it, to see these things up close as they grow to trust that these things work. And so we're not saying that every place has to be so confined, but we feel like there are certain places that warrant it. And so we're trying to work to make those balances and find that path through this to enable all of us to treasure our world. Now I want to switch to plants and just a couple stories about plants. One, this is interestingly an ice plant relative. You guys have spent hours, days, years of your life controlling regular old Carpobrotus edulis and chilensis. But this relative, Sesuvium verrucosum, was once here in Santa Barbara County. But when, ironically, they built Laguna Blanca and that golf course, they extirpated the last known documented population. So with Wayne Farron's help, we got seeds from the closest population. And Wayne Chapman, my nursery manager, reestablished these plants, and now there's seeds spreading throughout the marsh, and it's super exciting to bring back this beautiful little salt marsh plant. And then I think one of our things we're most happy about is that we nailed it. We were pretty sure we could have habitat for this endangered plant, Astragalus pycnostaches variety lenosissimus, otherwise known as Ventura marsh milkvetch. This plant was essentially extirpated, completely extinct in 1967. There were no known populations of it. In 97, a Fish and Wildlife Service biologist found it on a proposed development site survey. And from that initial discovery, plant seeds have been collected, carefully curated. Some other restoration projects have happened, but almost all of them, they're having to continue to irrigate the plants. We have a place on our site that we felt was just perfect. It has sandy soils, it's adjacent to those plovers, actually, and a high water table. And so we grew the seedlings in our greenhouse and planted them out about a year and a bit ago. And maybe now, yeah. Anyway, and these plants started out getting a little bit of irrigation, but literally within about a month, it had started raining and the plants reached the ground water table, and we haven't had to irrigate them since. They are thriving and flourishing. We have essentially the largest self-sustaining population of this plant anywhere in the world. And what's really exciting is our work documenting these pollinators has identified the endangered Bombus crotchii, an endangered bee on this plant. So when you get these symbiotic species and the available, then you can really encourage populations of all kinds of special status bees. And these native bees are something that we should all be really focused on. They are key to our biodiversity, key to the food web, and super important for all of us to treasure. And that's been super fun. Finally, I'm just going to have this last section on public access. We built bridges and trails for people to enjoy, and use of the trails during this COVID crisis actually multiplied by 5. We went from 25 users an hour to about 120 users per hour. So people really took advantage of this wide open trail and the views and the open air during the COVID crisis. We opened it to the public. This is the trail system kind of looking from above. We opened it to the public in October of 2018 in a partnership with Coal Point and the Coastal Fund and the Audubon Society. We had birds and all kinds of activities for kids, owl pellet dissection. Now we could actually dissect burrowing owl pellets. People could see what they're eating. I'll give you a hint. Those burrowing owls are eating earwigs, which is kind of fun. They also like potato bugs. Anyway, we had a great celebration, people getting to learn about the project site. For those first few years, kids were biking to school, to Isla Vista School on the grounds. Now, of course, they only bike to their bedrooms to do cooking, but soon we'll all be back, I know. And then we also ran a whole array of kids in nature outdoor education program. We've probably served about, this says 1,200 students. I think we're up to like 1,500 students, not counting what we haven't been able to do this year. But the students have been planting and birding, learning about plant adaptations and food webs. And what's cool is this is a UCSB student. So these UCSB students are training the K-12 students. So it's kids are learning, UCSB students are learning how to implement environmental education. And these other kids are gaining a connection to nature and a connection to the university campus and to the idea that this could be them sometime. Finally, we just implementing a few grants. This is a state parks funded grant to build a visitor plaza here. We just installed last week our first interpretive signs. As I pointed in that initial slide, we have our discovery trail over here, and we're about to finalize our Chumash signs, which interpret how they use native materials to live. And we're going to have some Spanish English signs, and we have other cool things happening. We have an outdoor classroom going to be installed. We have a donor, hopefully online, who's helping us convert part of our building we call the Roost, our maintenance shed, a half of it into a field station to do science with laboratory tables and microscopes and ways for this field work in this living laboratory to really come alive. Many of these overlooks are named. That's part of our effort to build our endowment, because I was able to raise money from state and federal funds to implement this whole project. But when it comes to maintenance and programs, really the only way to do it is with an endowment that will fund into perpetuity a research coordinator, a mentor position, maintenance staff to continue to bring this biodiversity, protect these special species. So we are about 5 million along the way toward our $10 million goal, which sounds like a lot, but for $5 million, someone could name this whole site. You notice North Campus Open Space is a kind of a neutral name. We'd be happy to have it named after you. There are other opportunities to contribute to positions to helping us keep this as a living laboratory for students in the community for a long time. This is one of the overlooks where you can come and hang out and enjoy this site. And we look forward to seeing you out there anytime. Here's just another site. In the mornings, it's just an amazing reflection of the mountains and the context for this historic wetland. And as I mentioned, this project was largely funded with public dollars. And I just today awarded another WCB grant to restore the parking lot and some more overlooks and trails and things like that. So we're super excited to finalize most of these public access components for you all in the coming 5 months or so. And hopefully by then we'll all be able to go out and hug each other and explore the outdoors together. Thank you very much. And if there's any questions, let me know.
I can't
I
turn on
can
the
keep
video.
this up and you guys can ask me questions, or I can take off the screen share as you all desire. Thanks.
Yeah,
Applause and applause.
thank you
That's
so much
wonderful.
for the talk, Lisa. I will field the questions for you. You want to take off the screen share or not? I like the burrowing owl picture.
Okay.
Lawrence wants to know, what do you do with feral cats and Norwegian rats and other alien animals when they end up in your traps?
In our traps, well, we don't have any Norwegian rats or cats. Those traps are really tiny. They really only hold mice. And cats, we try to work with the homeowners to encourage them to keep them in their homes or to put the colored collars on them. Feral cats is a real risk, as you saw from that bird image. We have a lot of ground dwelling birds. We have Virginia rail, we have Sora. Just on my bird survey Wednesday, we had 3 Wilson snipes. So we have a lot of these birds that are vulnerable to cats. So cats is an issue, and we will probably end up having to work with animal control if it become a problem.
Along a similar note, are gophers and moles considered natural or pests? Do they threaten any of the projects going on at the open space right now?
Yeah, they're a real fine line. We pretty much have worked with those animals just fine. The gophers are just discovering the Ventura Marsh milk vetch. So we're kind of watching that and hoping that they don't decide that they're too tasty. So we're doing a little bit of care by that endangered, but otherwise, no, we just work around them and hope that we kind of flood them with opportunities. And also because we don't irrigate the site, it's generally not as attractive to them as it is in a garden, say.
Great.
Web.
Aaron wants to know, is the Carpobrotus related pink and purple flowering plant in the field, or is it still in the nursery?
No, sorry, I didn't show any field pictures. It wasn't flowering right now, but it is, yeah, it was planted in the field right in 2018 maybe, and now we're finding it all over the proper elevation in the salt marsh where it should be. I'm going to stop my screen share in case you can see me, just to make it a little bit more people-like.
Thank you.
But yeah, so it is spreading all over. We've got hundreds of plants now established.
Great. And Madeline noticed there were purple pipe irrigation. Is there any studies of effects of reclaimed water on the replanted natives? Is that water higher in nutrients?
So we bought purple pipes because we thought we were going to get permission to use reclaimed water. Because we wanted to open the site to the public, there are so many rules regarding that we could never get approval to work incrementally the way we wanted to. So we decided, because we're not setting up a lawn that's going to be irrigated forever, you know, that we just water a particular area for maybe 3 to 6 months, depending on when we planted it, that we would use potable. And it is better, because reclaimed water can be challenging for native plants with its salinity and high nutrient issues. Yeah, so they're purple pipes by default, not in use.
Great. Is there a film about the golf course conservation phase of this project and a map online? Where can people find that?
Yeah, so if you just type in UCSB open space, you can get to not our website, but another campus website. And on that, you can see the movie From Golf Course to Wetland that Michael Love made. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter, which is just once a month, really fun. We have on our, trying to think, we made a great little tour well, on our website, cber.ucsb.edu, you can go to the North Campus open space page, and there are maps and things there. A walking tour. We have the link to a walking tour that you can take. And we're actually looking into, if anyone's really skilled in, virtual kind of things that someone could use on their phone, or hoping to develop sort of QR codes that people could touch and then get the latest info. What birds we're seeing this week. We could update this QR code on a weekly basis and say, hey, go see the Wilson snipe over here, and things like that. So we're trying to develop some of that kind of signage around that isn't so permanent, but allows you to link easily to online relevant information.
Great. Nancy wants to know if it's possible to get rid of the oil and gas tanks from the adjacent site and restore that area, and how can Nancy and other people who are interested support that kind of effort?
So that is a great question, and I really encourage you all to do with that.
This is the story of the
Elwood Marine Terminal, MT campus, and before Veneco went out of business because of that pipeline spill in 2015, we had developed a really great restoration plan with them to store that, and we hope to be involved in that project. Campuses, because they didn't get the money from Veneco to do it, or Veneco didn't, went out of business before they did it. They've been working with previous oil companies who leased that land to see what they would do. And Exxon has actually ponied up and helped with this degassing effort. But I think continuing to say, drop a note to Henry Yang and say, hey, we'd love to support the efforts to, not saying financially, but just, we would like to encourage us to continue to work towards that. I feel certain that with pressure, these oil and gas companies will follow through. It's a public relations thing that they should do. And I think if they give some money, we can get other public money, because it is the most, once we bring that back, it is the high point for all the Elwood area. You can sit there, and we will for sure have an amazing overlook there. And you can look down at Devereaux Slough and all the dunes at Coal Oil Point, look back at our part of the wetland, and it's going to be one of the most special places around. So I do hope that that is the next thing on the restoration chopping block, shall we say.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's a great spot. Two people mentioned or wanted to know how many burrowing owls are currently out there. Someone said they saw them at 2 different hibernaculums.
There were 3 at the most documented for sure at one time is 3. Right now, I think there's possibly 1 or maybe 2. They're right around now, starting to fly back north to start to breed in a little while. But yeah, it's pretty fun to see them. They're so stealthy and quiet.
Great. Gabriel wants to know if there were any elements in the planning and research stage that were critical to your success, or that you would warrant special interest for the success of the project.
We had students and staff working on a lot of soil and hydrology assessments. We looked at groundwater, we documented flows, we looked at the soil type. And I think all that initial research really helped convince the agencies of the viability of the project. So I think those were really important to it. The work Mark Holmgren from the Audubon and UCSB formerly, he helped us with a bunch of bird surveys initially to help define what habitats remaining on the golf course or South Parcel were really crucial to retain, and which ones would be better to restore. So all these sort of fine decisions, what plants could grow in soils, would they grow? They gave us the confidence to do the project. So all that research was really crucial for the project.
Great. A couple people wanted to know about the educational efforts that you're making. I know you mentioned the students. What's the reaction from students when they come to the site?
Well, what's great is we have so many students who've worked on the site, as you saw. That aren't working on land, I think at this point, there's like amnesia. People keep know that it was a golf course for. I hope the signage will see that, but it's funny how just go to the site, it looks so natural, you might not even realize what it is. But the students that have worked with us say that they feel really inspired, that they can make a difference, and that it is possible. Everything isn't sort of doom and gloom and climate change and there's no hope. I think it does give people hope. And in terms of educational programs, we are working on developing our materials for a docent program. And hope is that, and we have already had about 25, 30 people sign up, want to be trained, and we look forward to having more people. And the idea is that some people might be comfortable just regular walkers, and they would just engage with people and say, hey, did you know there's, the Wilson Snipe over there, for example. And other people might agree to lead a tour on Saturdays or something, and then we can promote that anybody can come and learn a little more through the docent programs. Others might want to work with the K-12 students. So we're sort of slowly ramping up to that with the COVID thing, kind of interfacing with how much natural history training can you do on a screen. We feel mixed about that. You can get a lot, but being out there, touching the plants, seeing the birds is what really connects us at our heart to these places.
Yeah, I think we have time for a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up here. So
I have one. Lisa, have you considered putting webcams out there for live viewing, and have you used trail cams to capture pictures?
Yeah, we actually have that student that's doing the coverboard study is also studying the hibernaculums, and he has 14 trail cams deployed out there trying to document that. And we've used them before, sometimes to catch trespassers and sometimes to catch wildlife. But we have seen things. Live cameras, I think, would be kind of a neat way to go. Like if we had a nest of something, the way they do with the, the
Right.
owls. I mean, the
Eagles, yeah.
Eagles stuff. That would be cool. I don't have that expertise, but if we partnered with someone, I think that would be pretty cool.
Let's chat. I might be able to turn you on to somebody.
Great.
Go ahead, Maury. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Just a couple more here. So Linus wants to know if the restoration of the North Campus open space has had any effect on the Devereaux Lagoon / slow, like salinity, plants and wildlife, things like that.
So that was one of, if I had slowed down enough to let you read our goals, the top goal was not to negatively impact Devereaux Slough with the project. And I think that we have succeeded in doing that. It expands the water across a broader landscape, and it causes the system not to flush as much, which keeps more habitat available long-term. We've been documenting all the water quality aspects of the project, and we haven't seen any decline of anything in terms of, dissolved oxygen and those sorts of things. And wildlife are, no specific impacts to that. So I feel that, and no erosion, big erosion issues have either eroded down there or filled it with sediment. So those were our main concerns that we were looking at in terms of whether we could or would impact that system.
Great. Two more quick questions here. Lynn wants to know that the water level in the estuary appears to fluctuate greater than what the tide would dictate. Do you have any explanation for that?
Yeah, so this system is only intermittently tidal. Now it's actually tidal now. You might have noticed we have like a full moon right now. And if you look at your tide chart, you'll see that, tides are up above 6 feet. The mouth breached, with that rain event at the end of January, and it's been intermittently tidal now. So much sand went out because it was about a month ago. It also breached during a really seriously low tide. So the system, when the high tides are high, the water is coming in. But most of the time, the sand berm at Sands Beach is high. And so when it rains, it actually perches the water in the system. So you're right, high tide would only be up to about 6.5 feet elevation. Right now, if you were out there and you walked around, it's at about 5 feet. But let's say, like in January before it breached, the sandbar was fully high at about 9.5 feet. So the water could go up 4 feet higher than it is now in our system and be perched. And so that's how these intermittently tidal systems work. So yes, it is more extreme than tide, but it's less variable.
Great, great answer.
Yes, it will.
And the last question that we have time for is from Mary, who wants to know if you have to go through any permits or processes to do a restoration project of this type, and what resources had to become available. It's a little bit of a broad question, but maybe
So
you
yeah,
can
so
elaborate.
fully, when you're moving 350,000 cubic yards of dirt, equivalent of 29,000 truckloads, yes, you need permits. So we actually have a permit from every agency you can imagine, you know, Fish and Wildlife, Army Corps of Engineers, State Fish and Wildlife, Historical Society. I mean, everything you could imagine, Coastal Commission. And so you have to have a detailed plan that details everything. And then to make it happen, you need resources, and that's where all those agencies, so all the county, state, and federal agencies that funded this, you know, Caltrans built the trails because they have to fund non-vehicular traffic things. They didn't have to, but we won a grant from them. But funding from Wildlife Conservation Board, state parks, Ocean Protection Council, State Coastal Conservancy, just on and on. There's like 15 of them, and they contributed a total of like 16 million to this project. So it costs a lot to do something like this.
It does, you know. We enjoy the fact that our coastal system is regulated, open to the public, and but when we work in it, it's you go through the paperwork like you're building a hotel. It's really massive amount of hoops you got to jump through. Lisa, we need to wrap up, but this was absolutely wonderful. We enjoyed it. I just want to comment that CCBER has been doing so much amazing work around UC Santa Barbara and elsewhere for many, many years. They're a wonderful organization, as you've seen. And, you know, I'll mention that Channel Islands Restoration has worked on the habitat, the original habitat, or the rediscovered habitat of the Ventura Marsh milkvetch. And it's true, they have to, we've gotten rid of all the weeds, but plants have to be irrigated to stay alive. And I've never seen such a huge patch of Ventura Marsh milkvetch. That was very, very impressive.
Right.
And I'm also really, you know, grateful that you're looking at an endowment to fund the project, because as you know, most restoration projects are funded for a single year, maybe 2 or 3 at the most is the most common. So yeah, organizations have to raise the money themselves if they want to continue to do ongoing work to maintain these sites. And we have to in our environment. There's just weeds floating around all over the place, and they'll take over.
Yeah. And
so
campus,
Lisa, thank you very much.
thanks.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say campus is contributing to some, but we really want to take it above that and keep all these, just keep it at a really high level. And that's why we're seeking an endowment. But thank you. And it's so great to partner with you all on various projects, and having groups like you in this community makes all the difference. So
yeah, we've always loved working with CCBER. You guys are fabulous. You really make restoration look good. So thank you, Lisa, and thank you everybody who joined us tonight and joined us on Facebook. Thank you, Maury Spellman, our marketing director, for putting this all together, and everyone else. Have a good evening. And somebody asked if the webinar is recorded. It is, and we will be putting that up on the website. Where's that on the website, Maury?
It will be under webinars, so it should be under education webinars at cirweb.org.
So give us a couple of days to do that, but you can look at Matt Gilliam's presentation from last month if you go there. Thank you again, everyone. Have a good evening and stay healthy, everybody. Yes.
Bye.